The saga continues. Here is section 4 of chapter 21, my friends. Let's talk about burying and burning in that stuff, that waste of ours. So, municipal solid waste is, in the United States, is quite readily put into landfills. But there are some big, huge waste-to-energy incinerators out there. So, that's a benefit in at least some ways. This is where we are burning the waste to produce heat, which boils water and then is used to produce electricity. So there's about 98 of these bad boys in the United States. There's one down in the Denver area. That's, I think, the closest one I know to us. In addition, there are some European countries that use most of their solid waste gets put into there. So they burn about 90% of theirs. There's not a lot of places to put it in smaller countries, in different places like that. They don't have a lot of land use. So of its rubbish, 90% of it's burned. So what are some issues with this process? Well, it can take up a lot less space in landfills, about 90% less space. So that's good. But it does increase the concentration of hazardous waste. So it's taking up 90% less space, but the space it takes up, that stuff is not good for you. And so how does that process happen? Well, let's take a gander. Pull your dump truck in full of garbage, pour it into the waste pit. That gets picked up, thrown down a conveyor belt that goes into a furnace and burns hot. That burning hot heat goes into a broiler, which heats up water, turns it into steam, which comes in, turns a turbine and makes electricity. While it's doing that, then the backside of this has that steam come out, goes down through here through a scrubber, goes through a scrubber, wet scrubber, so it kind of cleans it out a little bit, and then cleans out, the wet scrubber cleans the fumes. Then it goes to an electrostatic precipitator, which also creates, actually takes all the little fine chunks and makes them stick together and clump together and make bigger chunks, cleaning the air further before it goes out a smokestack, exhaust pipe, if you will. When that wet scrubber happens, it turns it into dirty water. I also have a bunch of ash building up from the burning of the coal. Goes into the ash, mixes together. So I have this nasty water and this ash that then gets taken to a landfill. So this stuff down here is gnarly stuff. I mean, it's high in mercury and heavy metals. You know, it's much more toxic than the average stuff. But in the end, it makes some sweet electricity. Here's a picture of one, for instance, for you. Advantages and disadvantages. Reduce the volume of stuff. Less landfill space needed. Low water pollution, relatively speaking. It concentrates the hazardous waste in a smaller space. You can sell the energy that's made. They have modern controls to help make it less pollution in the air and water. And some facilities can recover and sell metals, which is handy as well, because when you burn stuff, the metals will come out and you can collect those. They can be really expensive to build. They can cost more than landfills for sure. They're difficult to get in a spot where people aren't upset to have them around. They produce lots of CO2 and air pollution. They can be stinky. Sometimes they can produce, they can encourage waste production because it's like, wow, this is burning. And then they can compete with recycling, which is something that we might not want to have happen. Now, what about burying it? Well, when we bury it, we can actually bury our municipal solid waste in one of two ways: open pits or sanitary landfills. And so those are a little different from one another, but open pits are basically holes in the ground. You dig it, you dump your junk in, and you bury it up. So these are very common in developing countries and in certain places in the United States, but they're becoming less and less frequent. Sanitary landfills are ones that have specific layers put into them that have been compacted and covered with dirt daily to reduce certain things. There's liners surrounding them to not allow the stuff to seep into the groundwater. So these are a little bit more environmentally conscious, if you will. So this is a municipal landfill, a sanitary landfill. And so you can see the close-up of it where there's actually layers of dirt And then there's these pipes that collect of this nasty liquidy stuff that seeps out the bottom of the landfill. You can think of it. It's raining through whatever the landfill, seeps through all that trash and that gunk that comes out at the bottom. Leachate is quite gnarly. So it sucks that stuff in to process it. And then there's more sand. And then there's layers of plastic to protect it underneath that. Then there's clay underneath that. And then there's compacted soil underneath that. And then bedrock underneath that. And so it doesn't really have a place for the water to go per se. And so then you start filling with trash and then dirt and then trash and then dirt, and you get these layers of trash and dirt built up. And then over the top of it, you cap it with compacted dirt and another liner of plastic layering and some more drainage stuff and some quality soil, and then plant grass on top of the whole thing. And it kind of creates this big, huge cocoon of landfill space that's being utilized. So this is another picture of that same thing. Here's the compacted solid waste. These pipes you see running all around in there, that's that leachate system that I was talking about. And a lot of times that leachate will then be pumped off and taken to a processing treatment plant for that. But that stuff's gnarly and it has to be carefully taken care of. In addition, there is pipes that are usually put into the actual trash as well, because one of the processes that happens is bacteria eat the trash and create methane gas. If you don't have a way for that to escape, it can blow up, which isn't good. So they actually can collect that and then take it to its own power plant and use that to burn and create electricity. In addition to that, they usually drill several wells around the area, collecting samples from the groundwater to make sure that there's no leaks or problems happening. And so our landfill is doing a lot of this stuff, for instance. So I just talked about these two things, the leachate and the methane gas, and the issues involved with both of those are the concerns what we need to be careful about with landfills. And so here's some pictures of that stuff in action. You see the landfills being bowled over and compressed, dirt being put on top of them. Here's the trash being delivered. You can see this sloped area. This is all trash underneath here, and then you get these big mounds of grassy area that you can turn into parks or whatever if you'd like to. So here's the breakdown of advantages and disadvantages of sanitary landfills. There's no open burning, which is good. There's very little odor at them. There's very low chance of groundwater contamination. They can be very easy and quick to build. They don't take a lot of money to run. They can handle lots of waste at one time. And then we can repurpose that afterwards, soccer fields or whatever you want to use it for. And then there's no shortage of landfill space in lots of places like here, for instance. Disadvantages. Can be noisy and full of traffic because there's trucks coming and going all the time. There can be some dust that kicks up from them, which is gnarly. There's some air pollution just from the stinkiness of the gases being released and the trucks running around. You can release greenhouse gases as a result of it. There's decomposition of the waste, which happens really slowly, so it doesn't break down very quickly at all because it's kind of trapped in there. And then you can get leaks into the groundwater eventually if you're not careful. That's it for now.